Welcome to Delightfully Dysfunctional, a podcast about navigating the emotions of the human condition and the challenges that come with it. I'm Keilani Persian Mason, a psychotherapist and life coach with James Timmons, an ever-curious human. This is not a replacement for mental health therapy. Please seek out mental health care if that's what you're needing. This is an opportunity for self-healers to dive deep and understand more about themselves. Welcome back to Delightfully Dysfunctional. I'm Keilani, and today we have a special guest, Melissa Sims. She is the program director of Work to Live and also the co-host of a Mindful Moment podcast. Thank you so much for joining us, Melissa.
Thank you so much for having me, Keilani.
Yeah, I'd love to learn a little bit more about your role as the program director and a little bit about Work to Live. What is the goal there?
So basically, we are a mindfulness wellness training business, and we go into, corporations and stuff like that. Right now, we have a contract with the First Five LA program. I don't know if you know anything about that, but yeah, it's basically a state-funded program that it's like the first 5 years of life for children. So those are the most important. So what we do is we go in and we help the actual home visitors. So these are the people that work for the hospitals, work for these offices, and they go into these high-risk homes and they help people kind of learn to be better parents, learn to be a little bit more, mindful, and all kinds of things like that. So what we do is we basically support those people. We teach them mindfulness, we teach them communication skills and things like that. So what I do is I create the programs. I create a lot of the workshops with my mom. And I also do all of our animations. I'm co-host of the podcast. It's a big role.
Yeah. You wear a few hats. And what's so fun is that I actually didn't know some of those details about the specific specialty that you guys work with. And I've done similar work up here in Washington. And so that's really a fun, great. With an organization called Partners for Early Learning. But again, helping to train those home visitors and doing that work of kind of parent coaching, emotion coaching, mindfulness. So we're speaking the same language.
That's awesome. I didn't know that either. That's great.
Yeah, wonderful. And I believe you're also a yoga instructor. Is that correct?
I am. Yeah, I've been teaching yoga for about 8 years now.
Okay, how fun.
Yeah.
And when you're working with the clients that you have, how do you bring yoga or breath work into those workshops? Is there a way that you incorporate that?
Yeah, so a lot of what we do in our live workshops, I mean, we do a lot on Zoom ever since the pandemic, but we kind of switched our model around. But now that we're, easing back to in-person workshops, what we'll do is we'll just do a live session during the workshop. And it's very, beginner minded, but it's great because this is when a lot of people that would never try yoga, they get the opportunity to try it in a space where there's a bunch of other people that are brand new to it, try it. So they don't feel so, like the microscope's on them. And it's great. Right. They love doing it. So it's really fun.
Oh, it is so fun to be an introduction to a new skill for someone.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I hadn't mentioned, but you brought up your mother. So your mother, Teresa, she is the other podcast host for A Mindful Moment. And because she's coming from a background a bit in psychology and leadership, right? So when I think about my own relationship with mindfulness, it maybe wasn't something that was as common to see in my home.
Oh,
For you, though, was mindfulness something that was taught and practiced?
Actually, no. So I believe that my mom kind of really delved into this once my parents got divorced. And it was just kind of this like aha moment for her, like I need to do some soul searching. And so it really wasn't something that I was raised with. And what's interesting is, after her and my father got divorced and she went down this path, I kind of was on my own path. And I was like, I need to do something for myself, finding my inner self, and that was the yoga path. And somehow they just kind of converged back together.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and because yoga is just a mindfulness practice,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And how old were you at this time? So you were doing this soul searching and kind of came to mindfulness as well through your own path.
Yeah, I was when my parents were divorced, I was like 21, I think. So it wasn't really like something that affected me as a child. But once I had kids, and I
Yeah,
don't know if you have kids, but once I
I
had
do.
kids and my career kind of took that back seat, I was like, I don't want to be in the 9 to 5. I don't want to do that anymore. And so
Same.
I was a dancer as a kid, and so yoga was just kind of a natural, next step for me where I could
Mhm.
combine kind of the movement aspect and then also the spiritual aspect. So
Yeah, wonderful. I totally understand you, Mama. The same reason why I went into private practice to have a little bit more flexibility.
absolutely.
Yeah, and when you think about your parenting journey and the evolution of that, I just recently, actually this morning, was listening to the episode that was about mindful parenting, and I'm wondering how you incorporate mindful parenting in your home, in your times of connection with your kiddos.
It's funny. I wish I had found mindfulness a little bit sooner.
Don't we
Um,
all?
yeah.
Don't we all?
Life would have been so much easier.
Yeah.
When my kids were really little, that's kind of when, and I think a lot of moms go through this, when they're itty bitties and you're
Hmm.
like, what is my purpose in life? What am I supposed to do? Am I just a mom? It's okay to be
Right.
just a mom. And I think
Yeah.
once we realize that and we kind of get into the, that self-compassion and the
Mm.
acceptance mode of that, I wish I had found it earlier because I think my kids would be even more, emotionally stable than they are now. And they really are, they're
Yeah.
very grounded.
Yeah.
But
You felt, but maybe early on in parenting, are you saying that there was a little bit of like incongruence that you felt in that role? And
oh,
like,
totally.
yeah, like accepting that this caregiving time of my life isn't forever, but it's for right now.
Yeah, and it's necessary. I
Yeah.
think that a lot of moms and I'm no discounting to dads, but in reality it's
Mhm.
usually the mom that is going through this when the babies are
Right.
little.
Well, and then
And
studies also show that it's maternal mental health that really lends the most
oh,
to children's well-being. So, right, these are
absolutely.
just some of the facts, not discounting the role of fathers,
Yeah,
right?
and I think that we don't realize how much of our energy, and this is a lot of with mindfulness and with yoga, is that a lot of our energy, it really does kind of spill over onto our kids. And even if
Mhm.
we're not realizing that we're, putting that stress
Right.
out into that field of energy, they're feeling
Exactly.
it. And if I had
Um,
been able to be a little more grounded in those early days, I feel like I probably would have been a happier mom. But then,
right.
by the time my kids were, 4 or 5 years old, is when I was like, okay, I need to focus on me and find something to where I am, being the best mom that I can be, but also being my best self, because it's not just about my
Hmm.
kids. And
Right.
that's when I really found yoga and mindfulness. And now I think it's great. I'm able to communicate with my kids in a way that I don't think a lot of people that aren't into mindfulness can
Yeah.
do. Um, I think too often we kind of forget that our kids are humans.
Right. We
And
do. I mean, I think
yeah.
it's especially when I reflect on my experience as a child and I worked in elementary schools for a while, we expect them to be just little robots that follow orders.
Yeah.
And they have a depth of emotion and are little emotional sponges picking up on the environment, just like you said. And that means approaching parenting with a different kind of reverence and I
Oh,
think respect for that
100%.
relationship.
Yeah. And I think too, like, we want so bad as parents, and there's nothing wrong with this. It's totally natural, but we want so bad to mold our kids into this idea of like, this is what they should be. And they're already who they are.
Right.
So our
Yeah.
job is really just to support who they are, right?
Hmm.
And maybe help them grow in who they are, not change it. And I think
Hmm.
when we talk at our kids instead of to our kids, that's our biggest mistake as parents. And I think that really kind of disconnects us from our kids on an emotional level. And so, like for me with my kids, I've always been able to tell them, I'm so sorry I yelled at you. Mom
Right.
was having a bad day. I really shouldn't have done that. And my bad, please forgive me. And, that shows them it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to,
Mhm.
do all of those things. And it just really helps deepen the relationship with the kids and the respect. I don't
Right.
think we have a healthy respect for our children, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. And I think it lends also to such a secure attachment where they know that if they fumble, which is inevitable and part of
Mhm.
being human, that it is not the end of the world. And hopefully mitigates that inner critic that all of us can get stuck in. So we're doing so much in these early years, these formative years, to shape that voice, that internal voice that our kiddos
Mhm.
will have.
Yeah, and then to let them know it's okay to have the emotions, to feel all the
Yeah.
feels, and if they can see us being okay with our emotions and recognizing when our own emotions are maybe a little out of control, and
Mhm.
I think that's even better.
Yeah, yeah, wonderful, beautiful.
Yeah.
When you consider just the management of your time as a working mom and as a mom with like some creative pursuits as well, what does that look like for you? Is it kind of ex accepting those seasons where it's busier and knowing that it's going to ebb and flow? Is there certain kind of mindfulness practices that you make sure to incorporate as a routine? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So this is funny because a lot of our clients, they request workshops for most of the topics, and one of the biggest ones is time management. And it is really hard. I mean, now my kids are older. My daughter is in college and my
Mhm.
son is a junior in high school, but it's still really busy. I mean,
There's so many after school events.
oh, it's so much stuff.
Yeah.
And trying to fit my own stuff and then work and everything in there, it's really difficult, but I never multitask. I don't know if, your listeners know this, but our brains can't do it.
Mm.
And we can task switch, but we can't multitask. And so for me, managing my time that way, it's like I will make sure that I'm completely finished with something before I go on to something else. Or, try not to spill it over into the next thing. I use a Kanban board. I don't know if you know what Kanban is, but it's basically like you have a whiteboard with a bunch of post-it notes, and like
Mm.
there's your task list, there's your in progress, and then there's your complete. And
Oh,
it's really helpful. It's really rudimentary, but it's like if you can see all of your stuff in one space and
yeah.
you go, okay, I have that to do, but I'm not going to do that yet. And you just grab one of your post-it notes and you do that one thing and you're done. So that's kind of how I manage my calendar.
I love it. I'm gonna try this.
It's really
Try
good. Yeah, you
this
should
and
look
I'll
it up.
report back. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's really good. And then, honestly, it's great working with my mom because we do kind of we bounce off of each other, and she's very open to me with all of my extra things that I need to do in my life besides work. And it's really compartmentalizing, like there's work, there's home, there's kids, there's all of these other things, and being able to
Mhm.
compartmentalize and not let other things spill into each other really kind of helps me stay grounded and focused.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, those are some good tips. And when you are introducing mindfulness to people and you're maybe that's a term that they don't fully understand, what are some ways that you start bringing up, like broaching that topic and giving examples for them that make it a little bit more palatable?
I think a lot of people have a little bit of hesitation when it comes to mindfulness
Mm.
because they associate it with religion.
Mm.
And interestingly, it's really got nothing to do with religion, but I think because it probably a lot of the concepts are rooted in like Buddhism, with being in the present, things like that. That's kind of where it probably comes from. So what we try to do is just remove any kind of hesitation from it when we introduce it. But mindfulness is really, it's so simple. It's just about being in the present, not judging your thoughts, not judging yourself, having gratitude. There's a lot of those concepts that, yeah, do kind of align with certain religious practices, but it's really just about being in the moment. Like there is no tomorrow. There is no yesterday. There's only right now. And that's the only thing that we have any control over is right now. And once you can kind of grasp that, now listen, I falter a lot. Okay. A lot of times I will be anxious about the future or,
Mm-hmm.
rehash the past. But these are the things that if you can recognize in the moment that it's happening, that's mindfulness right there. You're just aware of what's happening in the moment and paying attention to the details.
Right, right. Yeah. I often give a visual for my clients when I'm starting to introduce this of like observing a river and you are noticing the leaves or the logs floating down the river and just paying attention as they pass rather than I'm going to jump on the log and ride it down the river.
Right.
I'm going to like start like just living with that as truth because our thoughts aren't facts and they can get away from us.
Yeah, and our thoughts are not who we are either. Our thoughts
Right.
are, they're just simply a thing, and once we
Mhm.
can realize there's no attachment there, then we're in mindfulness.
Yeah, yeah. Practicing some metacognition, able
Yes.
to, yeah, assess that a little bit further. Perfect. What are the more rewarding aspects of what you do with Work to Live Well or with the podcast? What are the things that really light you up?
So, as far as work to live well goes, it's great being able to work with my mom. I know a lot of people probably don't have wonderful relationships with parents at some point in their life, but I have a great relationship with her and I get to see her every single day. We do work remotely, but I mean, I still talk to her. We do tons of stuff together. So, that's one great aspect of it. But I think the most rewarding part at Work to Live is that we are helping people that are helping people.
Mm-hmm.
So, they kind of get, swept under the rug sometimes, these people that are helping other people in need and they need help too. And so it's
Mm-hmm.
really rewarding to, see the people in person after we've done a workshop and get a hug from somebody or, just saying thank you for, helping me through that. And it's great. It's a great, great rewarding thing. And then the same thing with the podcast, we get people that will, call us or email us or whatever, and they're so happy. Like, I never even realized that. When you give somebody an aha moment, it's so
Mm-hmm.
rewarding. And so we
It
get a lot of
is.
that on the podcast too.
Yeah, it's wonderful. That is rewarding. We have those moments here and it does. It
Yeah.
feels so good. It's like, oh, good, you felt it. That was the goal. Yay. Yeah. Um, reflecting on the things that you want for your future or any goals that you have when it comes to this really, really lovely community that you've created. Is there anything that comes to mind, or is that not being, maybe we're not being present?
No, I mean, it's wonderful and perfect to have goals. It's as long as we're not like holding so tightly onto those goals, right? That it affects
Right.
our present self. Um, I think as far as work to live goes, we really just want to help more people. Right now we're very like laser focused on this contract we have right now. But, maybe in the future, if we could help other people in other helping professions and, kind of get into that avenue, that would be great because just the more people we can help, the better. And then, with the podcast, we don't know. You're a podcaster, you never know what's going to happen in the podcasting world. So we're just going
Yeah.
to keep plugging away.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, I saw that I think there's over 2 million downloads that your podcast has had. So that's
Yeah.
really exciting. And it seems like a very fun and creative space for the two of you.
Yeah, it's great. It's nice to be able to connect. We were doing a lot of interviews around the COVID
Yeah.
period. And then now we've kind of switched it to just the two of us chit chatting. But, we've had some great people on the podcast. It's been, quite a journey.
Hmm. And for anyone who is wanting to get started with some mindfulness and feels a little bit intimidated, I think for many people, the idea of meditation, they're not really sure and it feels uncomfortable.
Yeah.
What is a good baby step where they might start looking?
So I'm not a huge fan of like, mindfulness apps, but I will say that if you're new to it and you want to get introduced to it, those are a great way to familiarize yourself. Headspace
Mhm.
app, the Calm app, things like that are great. But for people that are really hesitant to do meditation, I just want to say meditating is not about having an absence of thoughts. When I
Mhm.
first tried to meditate, it was hilarious because I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, oh, my nose itches. Oh, my ear itches.
Right. You're
No, that's
all
not.
hyper aware then of everything
So
else.
and then I was proud of myself. I'm like, oh my gosh, this must have been like a 20-minute meditation. It was like 3 minutes. So it's normal, but the whole point of meditation is not to have an absence of thoughts. It's just to notice your thoughts
Right.
without judgment. That's mindfulness meditation. It's where, oh, look at that thought as it goes by. And like you were saying, like the river, like the logs floating down the river. For me, I tell my clients to visualize a feather floating in the air. And that's a thought.
Mhm.
Oh, look, there goes that feather. It's not a pretty feather. It's not a light feather. It's not an ugly feather. We don't judge it. It's just a feather floating through the air, and that's all it is. And it's not attached to us. It's not part of who we are. It's just something we're experiencing. And meditation, a mindful meditation is basically just that. You are just being in the moment, being hyper aware. And it's okay to have those little moments of, oh, my mind just wandered.
Right. Yeah. It's that practicing of being non-judgmental, which is sometimes a very new concept.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's hard for
Yeah.
people. Yeah.
Wonderful. And my last question for you is if you could interview anyone. Now, I know you said you've kind of haven't been doing as many interviews, but we're in dream space land where
Yes.
anything is possible. Who would you want to interview?
So we've had like quite a few on the podcast that are wonderful authors in the mindfulness space. And somebody that I've always kind of looked up to, especially in the podcast space and kind of the working for yourself as an entrepreneur, is Tim Ferriss. I love him. I think he's great. He's like up there for me. So I think he would be great to have on the podcast. And then, John Kabat-Zinn, he's like the father of mindfulness. Of course, I would love to have him. But those would be probably a pinnacle of success for me as far as the podcast goes, for sure.
Yeah, we'll put it out there in the universe. We'll see what happens. Thank you so much for your time, Melissa. And I've just enjoyed learning more from you and about the things that light you up and the balance. And I think that's really the goal. That's so much of what I try to share with clients is there's so much gray. We don't have to think in the black and white or make those judgments. And what does that really look like in life? And it's not perfect, and that's okay.
Absolutely. I really appreciate you having me on the podcast today, Keilani.
Yeah, it was so much fun. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll keep in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.